Amara was born into a family that seemed perfect from the outside. Her father was a successful banker, always busy traveling between states for meetings and deals. Her mother, a high-ranking government official, barely had time to rest between her demanding schedules. They lived in a large, beautiful house in the bustling city of Lagos. The walls were painted in bright colors, the furniture modern, and the compound always clean and well-maintained. But beneath this outward perfection lay a quiet emptiness. Amara was their only child, a bright-eyed girl with smooth ebony skin and a smile that could light up any room. At 8 years old, she was already sharp and curious, constantly seeking her parents' attention. But no matter how much she tried, they always seemed too busy for her. "Amara, not now," her mother would say when she approached with her school drawings. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Her father would often wave her off with a tired, "Daddy's tired. Maybe later, okay?" Later never came. The house was always filled with people, maids, cooks, and drivers, but no one ever truly noticed Amara. They were all there to serve her parents, not to pay attention to the lonely girl sitting by the window, staring out at the world she barely knew. To fill the silence, Amara turned to the one thing that was always there, her mother's old smartphone, handed down to her when she was just 9. At first, it was just games and cartoons. But as time went on, the internet became her escape. She could explore a world that seemed exciting, full of people who talked about things she didn't understand but wanted to know more about. Her parents never noticed the hours she spent alone with the phone. They were just glad she wasn't bothering them. One day, Amara was sitting under the mango tree in their compound, scrolling through videos on the phone. She was 12 by now, a quiet girl who rarely spoke unless spoken to. Her parents were both away, her father on another business trip, her mother at an important conference. The compound felt large and empty. That's when Sani, the gatekeeper, approached her. Sani had been working for the family for years. He was in his early 50s, a man with a kind smile but sharp eyes that seemed to watch everything too closely. "Ah, small madam," he said, crouching beside her. "You like this phone too much. What are you always looking at?" Amara shrugged, her eyes still on the screen. "Just videos." "You should be careful," Sani said, his tone soft. "Some things on that phone are not for children." Amara glanced at him. "Like what?" Sani chuckled. "You'll know when you're older." His words planted a seed of curiosity in her mind. That night, when she was alone in her room, she searched for the things Sani hinted at. The videos she found were confusing at first, but over time, they became something she couldn't stop watching. She didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but it filled a part of her that felt empty. Sani noticed the change in her. He began to spend more time around her, offering compliments that felt strange but made her blush. "You're growing into a fine young lady," he would say. "Beautiful, like your mother." One afternoon, while her parents were away as usual, Sani caught her by the mango tree again. This time, he didn't just talk. He touched her arm lightly and said, "You're very special, Amara. I can teach you things your parents don't have time to teach you." At first, she didn't understand what he meant. But as the weeks went on, Sani's lessons became something dark and secretive. He would ask her to meet him in the servants' quarters when no one was around. At first, she wanted to say no, but the fear of losing the only adult who seemed to care about her kept her quiet. It became a routine. Every day after school, Amara would go to the servants' quarters. Sani would compliment her, give her small gifts, and then do things she didn't like but felt powerless to stop. The worst part was that no one noticed. Her parents were too busy to see the changes in her, how she stopped smiling, how she became withdrawn and quiet. Even when she started doing poorly in school, they just hired a tutor and never asked her what was wrong. By the time Amara was 14, the secret weighed heavily on her. She felt dirty, ashamed, and confused. She wanted to tell someone, but who? Her parents barely spoke to her, and the house staff seemed too busy or uninterested. One evening, as her mother was packing for another trip, Amara mustered the courage to speak. "Mama, can we talk?" Her mother barely glanced at her. "Not now, Amara. I'm late for my flight." Amara nodded, her heart sinking. She watched as her mother rushed out the door, leaving her alone once again. That night, Amara sat in her room and cried. She looked at the phone in her hand, the device that had become both her friend and her enemy. She wanted to throw it away, but she couldn't. It was the only thing that had ever been there for her. Amara's grades continued to drop, her teacher sent notes home, and she even skipped school a few times. Still, no one seemed to notice. Her parents would glance at the school reports and say, "We'll talk about this later," but later never came. One rainy evening, after another the servants' quarters, Amara sat in her room and stared at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the girl staring back at her. Her once bright eyes were dull, her face gaunt. She felt like a stranger in her own skin. Sonny's words rang in her head, "You're special, Amara. You should feel lucky." Lucky? She didn't feel lucky. She felt broken. She knew what was happening wasn't right, but she also believed it was her fault. That night, she searched online for answers. She found stories of other girls who had gone through what she was going through. For the first time, she saw the words used: dump, neglect. She realized she wasn't alone. But even as she read, she felt trapped. How could she escape? The following week, a new teacher arrived at Amara's school. Her name was Miss Adebayo, a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She taught literature and often stayed after class to help struggling students. Amara noticed how other students would talk to her about their problems, and Miss Adebayo always listened. One day, after class, Miss Adebayo approached Amara. "Amara, can we talk?" she asked softly. Amara froze. "About what?" "I've noticed you've been quiet lately," Miss Adebayo said. "You're not turning in assignments, and you don't seem happy. Is something wrong?" Amara wanted to say no, to brush it off like she always did. But something about Miss Adebayo's voice made her pause. Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. I don't know," Amara whispered. Miss Adebayo handed her a tissue. "It's okay. You don't have to talk now. But if you ever need someone to listen, I'm here." For the first time in years, Amara felt a glimmer of hope. Someone had noticed her. That evening, Amara couldn't stop thinking about Miss Adebayo. The next day, after everyone had left the classroom, she stayed behind. Miss Adebayo looked up from her desk and smiled. "Amara, is everything all right?" Amara hesitated, her heart pounding. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "Can I tell you something? But you have to promise not to tell anyone." Miss Adebayo's smile faded. She leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. "You can tell me anything. I promise I'll only tell someone if it's to help you." The words spilled out like a flood. Amara told her everything, about her parents' neglect, the hours she spent alone, and how Sonny. By the time she finished, she was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Miss Adebayo didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She simply listened, her face filled with quiet anger and compassion. When Amara was done, she took a deep breath and said, "Amara, what's happening to you is not your fault. And it needs to stop." The next day, Miss Adebayo contacted a social worker who specialized in cases of child abuse. Together, they visited Amara's house. Her parents were shocked when they were called out of their offices for an emergency meeting. When the social worker explained what had been happening, Amara's mother broke down in tears. "How could this happen? How could we not know?" Her father sat in stunned silence, his hands trembling. "We thought she was fine. She never said anything." The social worker was firm. "Neglect creates silence. Silence creates secrets. And secrets like these can destroy a child." That day, Sonny was arrested. Amara's parents were required to attend counseling sessions to learn how to rebuild their relationship with their daughter. The road to recovery was not easy. Amara struggled with feelings of shame and anger, but she began attending therapy sessions with the family. They started small, eating dinner together, talking about their days, and spending weekends as a family. At first, it felt awkward, but over time, Amara began to trust them again. 2 years later, Amara stood in front of her school assembly. She had been invited to speak about the importance of mental health and child protection. With trembling hands, she held the microphone and began to tell her story, not in detail, but enough to inspire others. "I thought I was alone," she said, her voice steady. "But I wasn't. And neither are you." The audience erupted in applause, but the most important applause came from her parents, who stood in the back of the hall, proud and grateful for the second chance they had been given to be a family. The applause thundered through the hall as Amara stepped down from the stage, her heart pounding. Her parents rushed to meet her, their faces glowing with pride. For the first time in years, Amara felt truly seen, truly loved. But in the crowd, a pair of eyes watched her closely. A man leaned against the far wall, his face obscured by the shadows. He wasn't clapping. He simply stood there, arms crossed, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. Amara caught sight of him just as he turned and slipped through the exit. A chill ran down her spine, though she couldn't explain why. Something about him felt familiar. "Amara, are you okay?" her mother asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Amara blinked and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little nervous." Her father chuckled. "You did great, sweetheart. Let's celebrate tonight, just the three of us." Amara nodded, but her mind lingered on the man in the shadows. That evening, after their small family celebration, Amara returned to her room. She was exhausted but couldn't sleep. The man's face, or what little she had seen of it, kept flashing in her mind. Unable to shake the feeling, she picked up her phone and scrolled aimlessly. That's when she noticed a new message from an unknown number. "You think you're free, but the past doesn't let go so easily." Amara's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. Who could have sent this? She glanced at the time, it was almost midnight. Her parents were asleep, and the house was quiet. She typed back, her fingers shaking, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who knows you better than you know yourself." Amara's chest tightened. She felt a rush of fear, anger, and confusion. She wanted to block the number, but something stopped her. Was this a prank? A sick joke? Or was it him? The following days were a blur of unease. Amara tried to focus on school, her therapy sessions, and her family, but the messages didn't stop. They were cryptic, sometimes mocking, other times almost sympathetic. "Do they know what you've done? You can't escape the truth. Secrets always comes back to haunt you." Amara deleted the messages each time, but their words lingered in her mind. She didn't tell her parents. How could she? They had worked so hard to rebuild their family. She didn't want to burden them. One evening, as she sat in her room, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a video. Her finger hovered over the play button. Her instinct screamed at her to delete it, but curiosity got the better of her. She pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from an angle that seemed low to the ground. It showed the servants' quarters, specifically, the room where Sonny had taken her so many times. Her stomach churned as the camera panned to the door. It creaked open slowly, and the screen went black. Amara dropped the phone, her heart racing. She backed away from it as though it were a venomous snake. Who had sent that video? How did they know? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it Sonny? No, he was in prison. Was it one of the staff members? But most of them had left after the scandal. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the house made her jump. By morning, dark circles ringed her eyes. At school, Miss Adebayo noticed her distress. Amara, is something wrong? Amara hesitated, then shook her head. I'm just tired. But Miss Adebayo wasn't convinced. Remember, you can talk to me about anything. Amara wanted to tell her, but the fear of what the messages meant kept her silent. The messages escalated. One evening, a new one arrived: meet me at the mango tree tonight. Or I'll send the video to your parents. Amara's blood ran cold. She gripped the phone tightly, her mind spinning. If her parents saw that video, it would shatter everything. That night, she sneaked out of the house and walked to the mango tree. The compound was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the wind. Hello, she called out, her voice trembling. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the man from the school assembly. He looked older up close, with a face lined by years of hardship and sharp, calculating eyes. Who are you? Amara demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Someone who knows the truth about you, Amara. And the truth always has a price. Amara's breath quickened as she took a step back. What do you want from me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The man stepped closer, his dark eyes locked onto hers. It's not about what I want, he said, his voice low and smooth. It's about what you are willing to do to keep the past buried. Amara's heart pounded. I didn't do anything wrong, she blurted out, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. The man tilted his head, a mocking smile on his lips. Didn't you? You kept quiet. You let it happen. And now you want to act innocent? His words cut deep, slicing through the fragile defenses she had built over the years. I was a child, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't understand. The man's smile faded, replaced by something darker. Maybe. But people don't care about that. They only care about the story, the scandal. Imagine what will happen when the video goes public. Your parents' careers, your reputation, all gone. Amara's knees felt weak. She clutched the bark of the mango tree for support. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man leaned in closer. Because everyone has a price, Amara. And yours is your silence. I want something from you, a favor. Do it, and I disappear. Refuse, and the truth comes out. Amara's mind raced as the man outlined his demands. He wanted access to her father's bank records, confidential information that could ruin her father's career if leaked. No, she said firmly, though her voice trembled. I can't do that. You'll destroy my family. The man's expression hardened. Your family was already destroyed the moment they chose their careers over you. Don't act like they're innocent in this. Amara clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath her fear. Why me? Why not go to someone else? Because you have something to lose, he said simply. Think about it. I'll give you 3 days. Without another word, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Amara standing under the mango tree, her mind spinning with fear and desperation. The next morning, Amara sat at the breakfast table, barely touching her food. Her parents noticed her unease, but didn't press. They had been trying to give her space, but now, their distance felt suffocating. Amara, are you feeling all right? Her mother asked. Amara opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain what was happening without tearing her family apart? I'm fine, she muttered, pushing her plate away. But she wasn't fine. For the next 2 days, the man's words echoed in her mind. She knew she couldn't give him what he wanted, but she also couldn't risk him exposing her past. Finally, on the 3rd night, she made a decision. Amara knocked on her parents' bedroom door, her heart pounding. Her mother opened it, surprised to see her so late. Amara? Is everything okay? Amara nodded, though tears welled in her eyes. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. Her parents exchanged worried glances, but ushered her inside. She sat on the edge of their bed and took a deep breath. Over the next hour, she told them everything: the neglect, the abuse, the video, and the man's threats. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but she didn't stop. By the time she finished, her parents were in tears. Her father held his head in his hands, guilt etched across his face. Her mother wrapped her arms around her, sobbing. "Amara, we're so sorry," she whispered. "We should have been there for you. We failed you." Amara cried too, but for the first it wasn't out of fear. It was relief that she wasn't carrying the burden alone anymore. The next day, her parents took immediate action. They contacted the police, who launched an investigation into the man's identity and motives. They also hired a cybersecurity expert to trace the messages and the video. Within days, the man was identified as a former staff member who had been fired years ago for theft. He had held a grudge against the family ever since and had used Amara's past as leverage to exact his revenge. The police arrested him, and the video was recovered before it could be leaked. As Amara watched him being taken away, she felt a mix of emotions: fear, anger, and a small, fragile sense of closure. In the weeks that followed, Amara and her parents worked hard to rebuild their relationship. They attended family therapy, where they learned to communicate and support each other. Her parents made changes to their work schedules, ensuring they spent more time at home. Amara, too, began to heal. She continued her therapy sessions and found solace in writing. She started journaling her experiences, turning her pain into words that felt empowering rather than shameful. One evening, as she sat under the mango tree, her mother joined her. "You've been through so much, Amara," her mother said, her voice filled with emotion. "But you're stronger than I ever realized." Amara smiled faintly, the weight on her heart feeling just a little lighter. "I just want to move forward," she said. And for the first time, she believed it was possible. The mango tree became a symbol of reflection for Amara, a place where the echoes of her past and the promise of her future converged. She spent many evenings there, writing in her journal, letting her thoughts flow like a river. But despite the strides she and her family had made, the scars of what had happened lingered. One evening, as the cool Lagos breeze rustled the leaves, Amara's father joined her under the tree. He sat silently for a moment before speaking, his voice heavy with emotion. "I failed you, Amara," he began. "I was so focused on providing for this family, I forgot to be there for it. For you." Amara looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't blame you, Daddy," she said softly. "But sometimes it feels like the past won't let me go." Her father reached out, taking her hand in his. "The past doesn't define you, Amara. What matters is what you do with it. You've shown more courage than I ever could. You're my hero." Amara's chest tightened at his words, a warmth spreading through her. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a victim, but as someone who had survived and grown stronger. Weeks turned into months, and life began to stabilize. Amara's parents became more present, attending her school events and spending weekends together as a family. But just as the wounds began to heal, a shadow from the past resurfaced. One afternoon, while Amara was at school, her mother received an unexpected visitor. It was Sani. He had been released from prison on account of overcrowding and good behavior. Now, he stood at their gate, his face gaunt and his posture subdued. "Madam, I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted to apologize." Amara's mother felt a surge of anger and disgust, but kept her composure. "You have no right to be here," she said firmly. "You lost that privilege the moment you hurt my daughter." Sani bowed his head. "I know. And I'll leave. But please, tell her I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. Amara's mother watched him go, her hands trembling with rage. That evening, she told Amara what had happened. "I thought you should know," she said gently. Amara's face darkened, but she said nothing for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I don't want to see him. Ever." Her mother nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. Amara's experience had left her with a deep understanding of pain and resilience. As she grew older, she found herself drawn to helping others who had faced similar struggles. At 18, she began volunteering at a local shelter for abused children. She shared her story cautiously, not as a victim, but as someone who had overcome. Her words resonated with the children, many of whom saw her as a beacon of hope. "Your story gives me courage," a young girl named Ada told her one day. "I want to be strong like you." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with purpose. "You already are strong, Ada," she said. "You just have to believe it." One day, while walking through the market, Amara saw him, Sani. He was older, his once strong frame now frail. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he quickly looked away, guilt etched across his face. Amara's heart raced, memories flooding back in an instant. But instead of fear, she felt something unexpected, resolve. She took a deep breath and walked away, her steps steady. That night, as she journaled under the mango tree, she wrote, "The past will always be a part of me, but it no longer controls me. I choose to move forward, to grow, and to help others do the same. That is my power." Years later, Amara founded an organization dedicated to child advocacy and education. She named it Under the Mango Tree, a tribute to the place where her journey had begun. Through her work, she became a voice for children who had been silenced, ensuring they were heard and protected. Her story inspired not just those in Nigeria, but people around the world, proving that even in the face of darkness, there is light. As Amara stood on the stage at the organization's annual gala, she looked out at the audience, her parents, her friends, and countless others who had supported her along the way. "Neglect and pain may leave scars," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "But those scars can become our strength. Together, we can create a world where no child feels unseen or unheard." The applause was deafening, but Amara didn't need it to know her journey had come full circle. She had turned her pain into purpose, her silence into a voice that echoed far beyond the mango tree. Years had passed since Amara founded Under the Mango Tree. The organization had grown rapidly, gaining recognition both locally and internationally. Amara was hailed as a symbol of resilience and change, but with that recognition came immense pressure. Balancing her personal life and the demands of the organization became increasingly difficult. She found herself constantly in meetings, traveling to conferences, and managing crises. The very thing she had built to protect others began to consume her. One evening, after a grueling day of back-to-back meetings, Amara sat alone in her office. The walls were lined with awards and pictures of smiling children, yet she felt a gnawing emptiness. She opened her laptop to read an email from her team in Jos, reporting on a shelter that had been vandalized by a local gang. "We need immediate funds for repairs," the email read. "The children are scared, and some have fled." Amara rubbed her temples, exhaustion washing over her. She had the resources, but this was the third crisis that week. The burden of being the face of the organization weighed heavily on her shoulders. As if the mounting stress wasn't enough, Amara soon discovered that someone within her organization had been embezzling funds. It started with discrepancies in financial reports, small enough to go unnoticed at first. But as Amara dug deeper, she realized the problem was far worse than she had imagined. She called an emergency meeting with her core team. "I want every transaction from the last 6 months audited," she said, her voice firm. Her team exchanged uneasy glances. "Amara, this could take weeks," her finance manager, Kunal, said. "Then start now," she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. Days later, the audit revealed that over 10 million naira had been siphoned from the organization's accounts. The culprit was someone she had trusted, a senior manager who had been with the organization since its inception. When confronted, the man, Mr. Danjuma, showed no remorse. "You think you're saving the world, Amara," he sneered. "But you're just one person. You can't fix everything." His words stung, but they also lit a fire in her. Amara knew she couldn't let this betrayal define her or her work. Amidst the financial turmoil, Amara received a desperate letter from a teenage girl named Zainab. The letter described a life eerily similar to Amara's own, a lonely girl neglected by her family, manipulated by an older man who worked in their household. "I don't know who else to turn to," the letter ended. "Please help me before it's too late." Amara's hands shook as she read the letter. It brought back memories she had tried to bury, but it also reminded her why she had started the organization. Determined to help Zainab, Amara reached out to her team and arranged for the girl to be rescued. But when they arrived at Zainab's home, they were met with resistance. Her family refused to believe the allegations, calling them lies and an attempt to ruin their reputation. Amara knew the battle wouldn't be easy, but she refused to give up. She worked tirelessly with local authorities and social workers to ensure Zainab's safety, even as the girl's family spread rumors about her. The combined weight of the financial scandal, Zainab's case, and the daily demands of running the organization began to take a toll on Amara's mental health. She found herself snapping at her team, losing sleep, and questioning whether she was truly making a difference. One night, after yet another sleepless evening, she confided in her therapist. "I feel like I'm drowning," she admitted. "No matter how much I do, it's never enough. There's always another crisis, another child to save." Her therapist listened patiently before replying, "Amara, you can't pour from an empty cup. You've dedicated your life to helping others, but when was the last time you helped yourself?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She realized she had been so focused on saving others that she had neglected her own well-being. With the help of her therapist and a supportive team, Amara began to set boundaries. She delegated more responsibilities, allowing her team to take on leadership roles. She also took a much-needed sabbatical, using the time to reconnect with herself and her family. During her time off, Amara visited Zainab, who had been placed in a safe home. The girl's progress reminded her that even small victories mattered. When Amara returned to under the mango tree, she was stronger and more determined than ever. She implemented stricter financial oversight to prevent future embezzlement and created a dedicated crisis response team to handle urgent cases. But most importantly, she learned to give herself grace. She understood that while she couldn't save everyone, the lives she did touch were worth every challenge she faced. Amara's life began to stabilize as she found balance between her work and personal well-being. But just when she thought she could focus on expanding under the mango tree, a disturbing letter arrived at her office. It was handwritten on plain paper, the ink smudged as if written in haste. "I know what you've been hiding, Amara. The past isn't as buried as you think." Her hands trembled as she read the words. The letter had no signature, no clue about who had sent it. But the familiar unease settled in her chest, the same feeling she had when she first received those cryptic messages years ago. Amara immediately informed her team and the authorities. They advised caution, suggesting it could be a prank or a baseless threat. But Amara couldn't shake the feeling that someone from her past was resurfacing, someone who knew too much. A week later, Amara's assistant entered her office with a troubled expression. "Madam, we just received a call. A reporter wants to meet with you. They said they're working on an exposé." Amara's stomach dropped. What kind of exposé? They wouldn't say. But they mentioned Sani. The name felt like a dagger to her heart. She hadn't heard it in years, but the pain and fear associated with it came rushing back. Amara agreed to meet the reporter, determined to face whatever was coming head-on. When the day arrived, she sat across from the journalist, her hands steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. The reporter wasted no time. "We've received information that your former gatekeeper, Sani, has been speaking out about his time with your family. He claims he was wrongfully accused and that you fabricated the allegations to cover up family secrets." Amara's breath hitched. "That's a lie," she said firmly. "He was convicted based on evidence. The truth is on record." The reporter leaned back, studying her. "I believe you, but others might not. Sani has a network of sympathizers. If this story goes public, it could tarnish your reputation and the organization's credibility. Amara's resolve hardened. Let them try. The truth will prevail. As the weeks went on, Amara discovered that the resurfacing threats weren't just external. Someone within her organization was leaking sensitive information. Financial details, internal emails, and even confidential case files began to appear online, fueling the narrative that Amara and her organization were corrupt. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the damage it caused, but because it came from someone she had trusted. Amara launched an internal investigation, working tirelessly to uncover the mole while also addressing the mounting public scrutiny. Amara decided to address the growing backlash publicly. She held a press conference, standing tall, despite the storm raging around her. "I have faced darkness before," she said, her voice steady. "And I overcame it by standing in the light of truth. My past is not a secret, it is my strength. And I will not allow lies and deceit to undermine the work we do here." Her words resonated with many, but the battle was far from over. The threats and leaks continued, forcing Amara to confront a painful question: was it worth it to keep fighting? Amara's fight caught the attention of an international child advocacy group, who offered their support. They sent a security team to help protect the organization's data and offered to partner with Under the Mango Tree on global initiatives. One of their representatives, a man named Elijah, became particularly invested in Amara's work. He was a former lawyer with a calm demeanor and a sharp mind. "Elijah," Amara said during one of their late-night strategy sessions, "why are you helping me so much? You barely know me." He smiled softly. "Because your fight is my fight. I've seen what happens when good people give up. I won't let that happen to you." Amara felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to trust someone outside her circle. The internal investigation revealed the mole, Kunnel, the finance manager who had questioned her decisions during the previous scandal. When confronted, Kunnel admitted his betrayal, but claimed he had been blackmailed by Sani's associates. "I didn't want to do it," he said, his voice shaking. "But they threatened my family." Amara was furious, but also conflicted. She understood the fear of losing loved ones, but Kunnel's actions had nearly destroyed everything she had built. "Leave," she said coldly. "I can't trust you anymore." With Kunnel gone and the leaks plugged, Amara turned her attention to Sani's growing influence. She worked with Elijah and her team to gather evidence of his manipulation and expose his lies. The final confrontation came during a live TV debate, where Sani appeared to defend his claims. Amara faced him with unflinching determination, countering his accusations with facts and exposing his history of deceit. "You took advantage of a child's vulnerability," she said, her voice unwavering. "And now you're trying to profit from her pain. But your lies end here." The audience was captivated, and by the end of the debate, public opinion shifted firmly in Amara's favor. The ordeal left Amara scarred but stronger. She restructured her organization, implementing stricter safeguards to prevent future betrayals. She also began training a new generation of leaders to carry the torch, ensuring the work would continue even if she stepped back. Amara's relationship with Elijah grew deeper, their shared passion for advocacy forming the foundation of a strong partnership. Together, they expanded Under the Mango Tree to reach more children across the continent. One evening, as Amara sat under the mango tree with Elijah, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "The past tried to break me," she said. "But it also made me who I am. And for that, I'm grateful." Elijah nodded, taking her hand. "You've turned pain into power, Amara. And the world is better for it." Months passed, and Amara felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. The organization was thriving again, the public scandals had faded, and her relationship with Elijah was blossoming into something unexpected but beautiful. One evening, Elijah approached Amara with an envelope. "This came in today," he said, his tone cautious. Amara opened it, finding a letter written in familiar handwriting. It was another message from Sani's network, but this time, it wasn't a threat, it was a warning. You may have won the public, but the fight isn't over. There are those who see your work as a threat. Be careful who you trust. Amara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She handed the letter to Elijah, her mind racing. What does this mean? Another attack? A setup? Elijah frowned. It could be anything. But whoever sent this seems to know something we don't. Amara knew she couldn't ignore the warning. She called an emergency meeting with her core team to discuss tightening security, not just within the organization but in their personal lives as well. Amara began noticing small, unsettling changes in her daily life. A car that seemed to follow her on her morning runs. A stranger lingering too long outside her office building. Anonymous calls that hung up as soon as she answered. She tried to dismiss them as coincidences, but deep down, she knew they weren't. Someone was watching her. Elijah insisted on hiring a private investigator to look into the threats. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Ifioma, assured them she would leave no stone unturned. Weeks later, Ifioma returned with her findings. There's a group targeting influential advocacy organizations across Africa, she explained. They believe these groups disrupt traditional structures and westernize African values. Amara was stunned. They see us as a threat because we protect children? It's deeper than that, Ifioma said. Your work represents change. For some people, change is dangerous. One night, as Amara worked late in her office, the power suddenly went out. The room plunged into darkness, and her heart raced. She reached for her phone, but before she could turn on the flashlight, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response. She grabbed a heavy paperweight from her desk and slowly moved toward the door. Peering into the corridor, she saw the shattered remains of a glass vase. Her phone buzzed with a message, "We warned you." Amara locked the door and called Elijah, her voice shaking as she explained what had happened. Within minutes, he arrived with a security team, but whoever had been there was long gone. This isn't just about intimidation anymore, Elijah said, his jaw tight. They're escalating. Determined to take control of the situation, Amara worked with Ifioma to uncover the people behind the threats. Their investigation led them to a shadowy network of influential individuals who had ties to corrupt politicians and business leaders. One name stood out, a powerful businessman who had long opposed child advocacy laws in Nigeria. His connections ran deep, and confronting him would mean risking everything. This isn't just about me anymore, Amara said during a strategy meeting. If we expose him, we could save countless others from facing the same threats. Elijah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then we'll do it together. Amara and her team launched a public campaign to expose the businessman's corruption. They presented evidence of his ties to child exploitation and his efforts to silence advocacy groups. The campaign ignited a firestorm of media coverage, drawing attention from international organizations and human rights groups. But it also made Amara a bigger target. One evening, as she left a speaking engagement, her car was forced off the road by an unmarked vehicle. She escaped with minor injuries, but the message was clear: they wanted her silenced. Elijah was furious. "We need to pull back, Amara. It's too dangerous." Amara shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "If we stop now, they win. And if they win, more children will suffer." The pressure on the businessman and his network grew as public outrage mounted. Protests erupted across the country, demanding accountability and stronger protections for children. Amara received messages of support from activists and survivors, many of whom credited her for giving them hope. Despite the threats, she pressed on, knowing the stakes were too high to back down. Finally, after weeks of relentless campaigning, the businessman was arrested, and his network dismantled. It was a hard-fought victory, but one that came at great personal cost. Though justice had been served, the ordeal left Amara physically and emotionally drained. She took time away from the public eye to heal, leaning on Elijah and her closest allies for support. As she reflected on the journey, she realized that the fight for change was never truly over. But she also knew she wasn't alone. One evening, as she sat under the mango tree with Elijah, she said, "The world may never fully change, but as long as we keep trying, we're making it better." Elijah smiled, his hand intertwined with hers. "And you've already changed it, Amara. More than you know." Amara looked up at the stars, a sense of peace washing over her. She knew there would always be challenges, but she also knew she had the strength to face them. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. And for the first time in years, she felt free. Years later, Under the Mango Tree had become a beacon of hope across Africa. Amara's work had inspired a new generation of advocates, leaders, and survivors who carried the torch she had lit. One sunny afternoon, a young girl approached Amara during a community outreach program. She was shy, clutching a small, handmade card. "This is for you," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara opened the card to see a drawing of a large mango tree, its branches stretching wide to shelter dozens of children. Underneath, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being our shade in the heat." Tears filled Amara's eyes as she hugged the girl. In that moment, she realized the true impact of her journey, not just the lives she had saved, but the hope she had given to countless others. As she sat under the mango tree that evening with Elijah by her side, Amara watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. "You've built something extraordinary," Elijah said, his voice filled with admiration. Amara smiled, her heart full. "We've built it together. And it's just the beginning." As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Amara closed her eyes, letting the gentle breeze carry away the weight of the past. She was no longer defined by her pain but by the love, courage, and resilience she had cultivated. Her story wasn't just hers anymore, it was a legacy. And under the mango tree, where it had all begun, Amara found peace.